You think it's just cold feet, until your legs start feeling like they don't belong to you anymore, and no matter what you take, nothing fixes it. Magnesium isn't failing you. It was never meant to solve what's actually breaking down inside your blood vessels. So what is the one thing your body quietly stopped making that's causing all of this? If you're serious about taking better care of your health, make sure you subscribe. I share simple, practical advice designed especially for seniors. And feel free to leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. I appreciate every one of you. Let's get back to it. Nobody warns you about the quiet ones. Not the dramatic health scares. Not the sudden emergencies that rush you to a hospital at midnight. The quiet ones. The kind that show up slowly, so slowly that by the time you notice something is wrong, you've already been living with it for months. Here's how it usually starts. Your feet feel cold. Not the kind of cold that a pair of thick socks fixes. The kind that lingers 8 p.m., 9 p.m., 10 p.m. Even when the rest of your body is warm. Even when the room is fine. Even when there's no reason for it. Then comes the heaviness. You've been sitting for 20 minutes just watching television, just resting, and when you finally stand up, your legs feel like they've been filled with wet sand. Heavy, reluctant. Like they need a moment to remember what they're supposed to do. And then, somewhere around the 3rd or 4th month of this, the nighttime cramps begin. Sharp, sudden. The kind that snap you out of a deep sleep with your hand already reaching for your calf before you're even fully awake. You mention it to someone you trust, and almost without fail, you hear the same 4 words. Have you tried magnesium? So you try it. You buy a good brand. You take it every night. You give it 6 weeks, maybe 8, because you believe in being consistent, in giving things a real chance. And at the end of those 8 weeks, not much has changed. Here's what I need to say before anything else. Magnesium is not the problem, but it was never designed to fix this. What's actually happening inside the legs of adults over 60, the real biological reason circulation starts to break down, operates at a completely different level, a deeper level. One that most health advice never reaches and most standard checkups never catch. I'm Dr. James Cross, and in my years of working with patients in this exact situation, people who were doing everything they were told and still struggling, I kept seeing the same gap. The same missing piece that nobody had addressed. Today, I'm going to show you exactly what that piece is. It's not a medication. It's not a procedure. It's a compound your own body used to produce in abundance and quietly stopped making enough of as the decades passed. Research now shows that by the time most people reach their late 60s, levels of this compound can fall by more than half compared to where they were at 40. And when that happens, your blood vessels don't fail dramatically. They just slow down, become less responsive, less efficient, less capable of doing the job your legs are counting on them to do. That is what we're fixing today. Stay with me. Most people think the body sends loud signals when something is wrong. It doesn't. Not always. Not with this. With circulation decline, the body whispers first, long before it ever raises its voice. And the tragedy isn't that people ignore the whispers, it's that they never recognize them as warnings in the first place. They just think they're getting older. So let me walk you through exactly how this progresses, because understanding the stages is the first step toward actually doing something about it. It starts with temperature. Specifically, your feet and lower legs running colder than they used to. You notice it at night mostly. You're lying in bed, body relaxed, room at a comfortable temperature, and your feet feel like they belong to someone standing outside in October. You add a blanket. Problem solved, right? Not quite. Because what you're actually experiencing is your peripheral circulation, the network of blood vessels responsible for delivering warm, oxygen-rich blood to your extremities, beginning to underperform. A study published in the Journal of Applied Physiology found that peripheral blood flow in adults over 60 can be measurably reduced compared to younger adults, even in those who consider themselves generally healthy. The vessels are present, the blood is there, but the delivery system is losing efficiency. Stage 1 is cold sensitivity. Most people dismiss it entirely. Then comes stage 2. This is where the swelling appears. Mild at first, a slight puffiness around the ankles by late afternoon. You notice your shoes feel tighter at the end of the day than they did in the morning. What's happening here is fluid accumulation. When circulation slows, the pressure inside your blood vessels shifts. Fluid that should be moving efficiently starts pooling in the lower limbs instead. It isn't dramatic, but it is progressive. Stage 2 is mild swelling and ankle pressure. Most people blame it on being on their feet too long. And then comes stage 3, the one that finally gets people's attention. Persistent heaviness. Not just when you first stand up, but throughout the day. A deep, aching fatigue in the calves that doesn't fully resolve with rest. Reduced endurance on walks that used to feel effortless. The sense that your legs are working harder than they should be, just to carry you across a room. This is the stage where most people finally start asking questions. But here is what I need you to understand. By stage 3, this process has usually been building for 1 to 3 years. The body gave signals. Quiet ones. Easy to dismiss, easy to explain away, easy to attribute to age, weather, long days, or just bad luck. But they weren't bad luck. They were biology specifically, a gradual breakdown in the very system responsible for keeping your legs alive, warm, and functional. And it has a very specific cause. One we haven't named yet. So, now you know the progression. You've seen how it builds quietly, gradually, stage by stage, until one day, the heaviness in your legs stops feeling like a minor inconvenience and starts feeling like a permanent fixture of your life. And at some point during that progression, you probably went looking for answers. Maybe you searched online. Maybe you asked a friend. Maybe you brought it up at a routine appointment and got 3 minutes of FaceTime before the next patient was called in. And what you were given, almost universally, was surface-level advice for a deep-level problem. Let's talk about what that advice usually looks like. The first recommendation most people receive is magnesium. And look, magnesium is a legitimate, well-researched mineral. It supports muscle relaxation. It helps regulate nerve signaling. For people dealing with cramps and nighttime tension, it offers real relief. But here is the clinical reality. Magnesium works downstream. It helps your muscles respond, but it does nothing to restore the energy capacity of the blood vessels themselves. It's addressing the symptom, not the system. And when the underlying system is compromised, downstream support can only take you so far. The second recommendation is compression socks. Again, not useless. Compression garments apply external pressure to the lower limbs, which mechanically assists blood return toward the heart. For swelling management, they provide genuine short-term comfort. But take the socks off, and nothing has changed. The vessels are still sluggish. The circulation is still inefficient. The compression did the work your vascular system was supposed to do on its own, and the moment you remove it, you're back where you started. The third recommendation, and this one has grown significantly in recent years, is circulation-boosting devices, vibration plates, foot massagers, infrared mats. The market for these products is enormous, and it keeps growing because people are genuinely desperate for relief. Some of them feel good. Some even produce temporary improvement in blood flow, but temporary is the key word. None of these interventions address the root cause. None of them reach the level where the problem actually originates. Here's an analogy that I think makes this clear. Imagine your home's electrical system is failing. The lights are flickering. Certain rooms aren't getting power the way they should. Now imagine someone hands you a brighter light bulb. It's not a bad light bulb. In a healthy system, it would work perfectly. But the problem was never the bulb. It was the wiring, the power source, the infrastructure behind the wall that nobody thought to check. That's exactly what's happening with most circulation advice. People are receiving brighter bulbs when what they actually need is someone to examine the wiring. A review published in Vascular Medicine noted that interventions targeting symptoms of peripheral circulatory decline frequently fail to produce sustained improvement because they do not address the underlying endothelial and mitochondrial dysfunction driving the condition. In plain language, treating the outside of the problem while the inside continues to deteriorate is not a strategy. It's a delay. And delays have consequences. Because here's what most people don't realize about circulation decline. It is not a standalone issue. When your legs aren't receiving adequate blood flow, your tissues aren't receiving adequate oxygen. When your tissues are oxygen deprived over months and years, the downstream effects reach far beyond cold feet and heavy calves. This goes deeper than most people are told. And that depth is exactly where we're going next. So, if magnesium isn't the answer, and compression socks aren't the answer, and the circulation gadgets aren't the answer. Then what exactly are we dealing with here? To answer that, I need to take you inside the blood vessel itself. Not the blood, not the heart, not the arteries you can feel pulsing at your wrist. The wall of the vessel. Because that is where this story actually lives. Lining every single blood vessel in your body, from the largest artery down to the smallest capillary, threading through your calf muscle, is a single layer of cells called the endothelium. Most people have never heard of it, but it may be the most important tissue in your entire cardiovascular system. Here's why. Your blood vessels are not passive pipes. They are not just hollow tubes that blood flows through the way water moves through a garden hose. They are living, active, constantly responding tissue. And the endothelium is the control center for all of that activity. When your legs need more blood, when you stand up, when you walk, when your muscles are working, your endothelium receives that signal and responds by releasing a molecule called nitric oxide. Nitric oxide tells the vessel walls to relax and expand, allowing more blood to rush through exactly where it's needed, exactly when it's needed. That's healthy circulation. That's what your legs felt like at 45. But here is what the research shows happens with age. A landmark review published in Arteriosclerosis, Thrombosis, and Vascular Biology confirmed that endothelial nitric oxide production declines significantly in older adults, reducing the vessel's ability to dilate on demand and deliver blood efficiently to peripheral tissues like your legs and feet. The vessels are still there. The blood is still moving, but the communication system, the biological signaling that tells your vessels when to open wider and push harder, is operating at a fraction of its former capacity. Think of it this way. Imagine a 4-lane highway that has been narrowed to 1 lane, not because of an accident, not because of construction, but because the traffic management system quietly stopped doing its job. Cars are still moving, but nowhere near the volume that should be getting through. That is your circulation at 65, 70, 75 if the endothelium is not being supported. And this is the part that changes everything. Endothelial function is not fixed. It is not a permanent consequence of aging that you simply accept and manage. It is responsive. It is correctable. It depends heavily on what your cells have available to work with at the biological level. Which means the real question isn't why your circulation has slowed down. The real question is what your blood vessels have been running without. And the answer to that question starts at a place most people never think to look. Inside the cell itself. That's where we're going. Because everything we've talked about so far, the cold feet, the swelling, the heaviness, the endothelium losing its ability to signal properly, all of it traces back to something happening at a level so small. Most people never consider it. But small doesn't mean insignificant. In fact, what I'm about to explain may be the single most important biological shift that happens in the human body after the age of 50. Inside nearly every cell in your body, including every endothelial cell lining, every blood vessel in your legs, there are tiny structures called mitochondria. You may remember them from a biology class decades ago. The powerhouses of the cell. That description is accurate. Mitochondria are responsible for converting the nutrients you consume into usable energy, the fuel that powers everything your cells do. Every contraction, every chemical signal, every biological process that keeps your tissues alive and functional. And your blood vessels are no exception. For your endothelium to release nitric oxide, for your vessels to dilate on demand, for your circulation to respond the way it should, all of that requires energy. Consistent, reliable, cellular energy produced by mitochondria working at full capacity. Here is where the problem begins. With age, mitochondrial efficiency declines. This isn't a theory. It's one of the most consistently documented findings in the field of cellular biology. A comprehensive review, published in Aging Research Reviews, confirmed that mitochondrial function in vascular tissue decreases measurably with advancing age, reducing the energy available for endothelial signaling, vessel responsiveness, and efficient blood flow regulation. In practical terms, what does that mean? It means your blood vessels are trying to do a demanding job with a depleted power supply. It means the signals that should be triggering dilation are firing weakly or sometimes not at all. It means your legs are not getting what they need, not because something is blocked, not because your heart isn't trying, but because the cellular machinery responsible for driving circulation has quietly lost its edge. And here is what makes this particularly frustrating. Standard medical tests don't catch it. Your blood pressure can read normal, your cholesterol can be managed, your resting heart rate can look perfectly fine on paper. And underneath all of those reassuring numbers, your vascular mitochondria are running at half capacity, and nobody flagged it, because nobody tested for it. There's another layer to this that most people aren't told about. As mitochondrial efficiency drops, oxidative stress inside the vessel walls increases. Free radicals, unstable molecules produced as a byproduct of cellular energy production, begin to accumulate faster than the body can neutralize them. And oxidative stress is directly destructive to the endothelium. It damages the very cells responsible for nitric oxide signaling. It stiffens vessel walls. It accelerates the exact dysfunction we traced back in Chapter 4, making the entire cycle progressively worse over time. Poor mitochondrial function leads to more oxidative stress. More oxidative stress leads to worse endothelial function. Worse endothelial function leads to poorer circulation. Poorer circulation leads to the symptoms you're living with right now. This is not aging in the abstract. This is a specific biological chain of events with a specific point of origin. And when you can identify the origin of a problem with this kind of precision, something important becomes possible. You can actually intervene at the right level, which means the solution exists. It just hasn't been handed to you yet. So we have a chain. A specific, documented, biological chain of events that starts deep inside your vascular cells and ends with the symptoms you've been trying to manage on the surface. Declining mitochondrial efficiency, rising oxidative stress, failing endothelial signaling, sluggish, unresponsive circulation, and somewhere inside that chain between the mitochondria losing power and the blood vessels losing function, there is a single point where everything begins to unravel. One compound. One molecule your body depends on to keep that entire system running. I haven't named it yet, and I want to be deliberate about that, because naming it too early, without the context we've built together, would make it sound like just another supplement recommendation. It isn't. What I'm about to show you isn't a trend. It isn't a wellness industry creation. It is a molecule your body has always produced, has always relied on, and has been quietly running short of for years, possibly decades, without a single test ever catching it. Here is what the research tells us. There exists a class of compounds known as endogenous cofactors, substances your body manufactures internally rather than obtaining purely from food. These compounds don't make headlines. They don't get marketing budgets. They exist in the background of your biology, doing essential work without any recognition. One of these cofactors sits at the very center of mitochondrial energy production. Without adequate levels of it, the mitochondria in your vascular cells cannot complete the energy cycle efficiently. The process stalls, output drops. And the downstream consequences reduce nitric oxide, impaired vessel dilation, poor peripheral circulation follow with quiet inevitability. A paper published in the Journal of Gerontology documented measurable age-related decline in this specific cofactor, beginning as early as the 4th decade of life. By the 6th and 7th decade, the years most of my patients are in, when they first come to me, levels can be less than half of what they were at peak. Less than half. And yet, this is almost never the first thing investigated when an older adult presents with circulation complaints. Instead, they receive magnesium recommendations, compression sock fittings, reassurances that this is simply what aging feels like. But it isn't simply aging. It is a measurable, specific, correctable deficiency operating at the mitochondrial level that has been hiding in plain sight inside the research literature for over 30 years. 30 years. And the reason it hasn't reached you until now has nothing to do with the quality of the science. It has to do with how slowly the right information travels, and how rarely anyone stops to connect the dots clearly enough for it to actually land. Today, we're connecting those dots. You've followed this all the way from a cold foot at bedtime to the inside of a vascular cell. You've earned the answer, and in just a moment you're going to get it. The compound is called coenzyme Q10, and if you've heard that name before, I want you to set aside whatever you think you know about it, because what most people understand about CoQ10 is incomplete in a way that matters enormously. CoQ10 is not a vitamin in the traditional sense. It is not something your body was designed to obtain primarily from food. It is something your body was designed to manufacture internally, continuously, at the cellular level, and use immediately inside the mitochondria to drive energy production. Think of it as the critical link in your cellular power chain. When your mitochondria convert nutrients into usable energy, CoQ10 is the molecule that makes that conversion possible. It sits at the center of a process called the electron transport chain, the biological sequence that produces the majority of your cellular fuel. Without sufficient CoQ10, that chain slows. Energy output drops, and every cell that depends on that energy, including every endothelial cell lining, every blood vessel in your legs, begins to underperform. Now here is the part that changes everything. After the age of 40, your body's natural CoQ10 production begins a steady, measurable decline. By your late 60s and into your 70s, research published in Biofactors confirms that tissue levels of CoQ10 can fall significantly below the threshold needed for optimal mitochondrial function. That decline doesn't happen all at once. It happens the same way circulation decline happens quietly, gradually, 1 year at a time, until the deficit is large enough to produce symptoms you can no longer explain away. Cold feet, heavy legs, poor recovery, disrupted sleep from cramping. Sound familiar? But there is something else you need to know. Something the label on most CoQ10 supplements won't tell you. CoQ10 exists in two forms. The first is ubiquinone, the oxidized inactive form. This is what the majority of supplements on the market contain, because it is cheaper to produce and more stable on a shelf. The second is ubiquinol, the active, reduced form that your cells can use immediately without any conversion step. Here is why that distinction matters for you specifically. Younger bodies convert ubiquinone to ubiquinol with relative ease, but research shows that conversion efficiency declines with age, which means an older adult taking standard ubiquinone CoQ10 may be absorbing significantly less active compound than the label suggests. For adults over 60, ubiquinol is not a premium option. It is the appropriate form. There is one more layer I need to add here, and it is particularly important if you or someone you care about takes cholesterol-lowering medication. Statins, among the most commonly prescribed drugs in the world, are documented to reduce the body's endogenous CoQ10 production, which may explain why so many people on statins report muscle fatigue, leg heaviness, and circulation complaints that their doctors struggle to account for. This isn't coincidence. It's biochemistry. So let's bring this full circle. You came into this with cold feet, heavy legs, and an answer that wasn't working. You were handed magnesium and told to be patient. You were given compression socks and told to manage it. You were reassured that what you were feeling was simply the cost of getting older, an unavoidable tax on the years you've lived. And none of that sat right with you. It shouldn't have. Because what we've walked through together today isn't a story about aging. It's a story about a specific biological process, one with a clear mechanism, a documented cause, and a genuine pathway back toward function. Let me give you the complete picture one final time. Your circulation didn't decline because your body gave up. It declined because a critical compound, one your mitochondria depend on to generate cellular energy, began falling away silently over years. Without that energy, your endothelial cells lost the capacity to signal properly. Without proper signaling, your vessels lost the ability to dilate on demand. And without that responsiveness, your legs stopped receiving what they needed to stay warm, light, and functional. That is not a mystery anymore. That is a mechanism. And mechanisms can be addressed. A clinical trial published in Nutrition Journal found that older adults who supplemented with ubiquinol CoQ10 over a sustained period showed measurable improvements in endothelial function, reduced oxidative stress markers, and self-reported improvements in physical energy and lower limb comfort. Their bodies hadn't stopped responding. They had simply been missing the right input. Yours hasn't stopped responding either. Now, before you do anything else, there are two things I want to be clear about. First, supplementation should always be discussed with your physician, particularly if you are on any medication. This is especially true if you take statins, blood pressure medication, or blood thinners, as CoQ10 can interact with certain treatments. What we've covered today is education, not prescription. Second, CoQ10 is not an overnight solution. The decline that brought you to this point happened over years. Restoration takes consistency, typically several weeks of sustained supplementation before meaningful changes become noticeable. Patience here is not passive, it is part of the process. What I want you to leave with today is not just information, it's a shift in perspective. Your symptoms are not random, they are not inevitable, they are not simply the price of the decades behind you. They are signals from a body that is still working, still trying, still capable of responding when given what it has been missing. Cold feet, heavy legs, disrupted nights, these are not your future. They are your starting point. And today, for the first time, you know exactly where to start. Now, tell me something. What was the very first sign you noticed that something had changed in your legs? Drop it in the comments, because your experience matters, and it might be exactly what someone else needed to read today. Thanks for watching all the way through. Staying informed is key to living a healthier, longer life. If you want more simple, practical health advice, make sure you subscribe and tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a comment and rate this from 1 to 10. Your feedback helps me create better guidance for you.